I still remember the day everything changed. It was a typical Thursday evening, the kind where the sun sets lazily, casting a warm golden hue over the neighborhood. I had just come home from work, tired but hopeful. We had a session scheduled with our marriage counselor, Dr. Stevens, that evening, a last-ditch effort to mend the cracks in our marriage. Little did I know, I was about to walk into the most devastating moment of my life. As I walked through the door, the familiar scent of my wife's lavender candles greeted me. It was a comforting aroma, one that made our house feel like a home. But that evening, the scent felt heavy, suffocating, like it was mocking me. I called out for Sarah, expecting her to come bounding down the stairs with her usual enthusiasm. Instead, there was silence. A silence that felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. I made my way to the living room where I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her face pale and drawn. She was scrolling through her phone, but her eyes were distant, lost somewhere far beyond the screen. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Hey, babe. You ready for the session?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Her response was slow, deliberate. "I think we need to talk." The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. My heart raced as I took a seat across from her, bracing myself for whatever was about to unfold. As she struggled to find the right words, I felt a chill run down my spine. I had sensed something was off for weeks, an uncharacteristic distance in her demeanor, late nights spent on her phone, and a certain nervousness that had crept into our conversations. But I never imagined it would lead us here. I thought we were just going through a rough patch, something we could work through together. Finally, the truth spilled out of her lips like poison. "I slept with Dr. Stevens." Those words pierced through me, sharp and unforgiving. My mind raced as I tried to process her confession. It was as if the ground had shifted beneath my feet, and I was falling into an abyss of disbelief and betrayal. "What do you mean?" I managed to croak out, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes filled with tears, but all I could feel was a cold rage bubbling up inside me. The man who was supposed to help us, help me, had become the very reason for our unraveling. It felt surreal, like a twisted plot from a bad novel. The man who had sat across from us, offering advice on love and communication, had betrayed my trust in the most intimate way possible. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as I struggled to breathe. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of anger and disbelief. How could she do this? How could he? My mind raced, replaying every session, every word of advice that now felt like a cruel joke. I had trusted him, believed in his guidance, and now I felt like a fool. As I sat there, my heart pounding, I realized I had two choices: to let this betrayal consume me or to fight back. In that moment, my resolve hardened. I wouldn't let them get away with this. Not her, not him. I would make sure that Dr. Stevens never gave advice again. The thought ignited a fire within me, a desperate need for revenge that I had never felt before, but for now I had to confront Sarah. I needed answers. My mind raced with questions, each one more painful than the last. How long had this been going on? Was it just a one-time mistake, or was it something more? The answers would come, but first I had to face the woman I thought I knew. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "Why would you do this to us?" Her response was a mixture of remorse and justification, but all I could focus on was the betrayal that had shattered our lives. I felt the room close in around me, the weight of her confession suffocating. I was drowning in a sea of emotions, and as I looked into her eyes, I realized I was no longer looking at the woman I had married. In the days that followed, I found myself spiraling into a dark pit of confusion and despair. My mind replayed the memories of our marriage, each moment tinged with the bitter taste of betrayal. I sat in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought I knew, and I began to reflect on everything that had led us to this point. Sarah and I had met in college, two bright-eyed students eager to take on the world. We fell in love quickly, and our relationship felt like a whirlwind, filled with laughter, passion, and dreams for the future. I remember our late-night talks, the way we would plan our lives together, discussing everything from our careers to the names of our future children. I thought we had built something solid, something unbreakable. But somewhere along the way, the cracks began to appear. I had been so absorbed in my job, striving to provide for us, that I failed to notice the subtle changes in Sarah. The late nights, the unexplained absences, and the growing distance between us were all signs I had chosen to overlook. I had convinced myself that they were just the stresses of life, the ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I now realized how naive I had been. As I sat there, the silence of the house enveloping me, I thought about our sessions with Dr. Stevens. I had trusted him to help us bridge the gap that had formed between us. Each time we sat in his office, I had felt a flicker of hope that we could mend our relationship. I had believed his words, his assurances that communication and understanding were key to overcoming our challenges. But now, those words felt like a cruel betrayal in themselves. How could he preach about fidelity and trust while sleeping with my wife? I recalled the first time we met him. He had a calm demeanor, a soothing voice that made me feel at ease. I had thought he was wise and insightful, a beacon of hope guiding us through troubled waters. But now I could see him for what he truly was, a manipulative predator hiding behind the facade of a marriage counselor. The realization made my skin crawl. I felt like a pawn in a twisted game, and I was furious at myself for not seeing it sooner. The anger swelled within me, a tempest of emotions that I struggled to contain. How could Sarah betray me like this? I had devoted myself to her, to our marriage. I had stood by her side through thick and thin, yet here she was, in the arms of a man whose job was to help us heal. I felt a mix of rage and sorrow, a potent cocktail that left me reeling. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I also feared what I might do in the heat of that anger. Instead, I filled my days with distractions, immersing myself in work and avoiding the conversations that needed to happen. But whenever I returned home, the hollow silence of our house greeted me like a specter, reminding me of the betrayal that lurked just beneath the surface. I found myself questioning everything. Was our love real, or was it just an illusion? Had Sarah ever truly loved me, or had I been blind to the cracks that had formed long before Dr. Stevens entered the picture? I wanted to believe that we could salvage our marriage, but how could I trust her again? The thought gnawed at me, a relentless ache in my chest. I began to think about the future, my future without her. The idea of starting over felt overwhelming. I had built my life around her, and now I was left with the ruins of our marriage. I envisioned a life where I could take back control, where I could rebuild and redefine myself. But the road ahead was uncertain, and the emotional weight of the betrayal felt like a lead ball in my stomach. In the quiet moments when the reality of my situation settled in, I felt a flicker of resolve. I couldn't let this define me. I wouldn't be the victim in this story. If they thought they could walk away unscathed, they were sorely mistaken. I would expose the truth, and I would make sure that Dr. Stevens never gave advice to anyone again. As the days turned into weeks, I began to formulate a plan. I needed evidence, something that would lay bare the truth of their affair. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I had to approach this methodically. I would gather the pieces of this puzzle, and when the time came, I would unleash the full weight of my fury. But first, I needed to confront Sarah. I had to hear her side of the story, to understand how she could betray me in such a profound way. The thought filled me with dread, but I knew it was a necessary step. I needed to face her, to demand answers, and to understand the depths of her betrayal before I could move forward. The day of the confrontation arrived, and I felt a mix of dread and determination swirling within me. I had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing the questions I needed to ask, the emotions I needed to control. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to reclaim my power. I would not be a passive victim in this narrative. I would take charge of my story. As I walked into the living room, I found Sarah sitting on the couch again, her posture tense, her eyes downcast. It was as if she instinctively knew that this conversation would change everything. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm yet calm. "About Dr. Stevens." Her reaction was immediate. She flinched, her eyes widening in surprise. I could see the guilt etched across her face. "I know you're angry," she began, her voice shaky. But please let me explain. Explain, I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. You think there's an explanation that could make this okay? You betrayed me, Sarah. You betrayed us. How could you sleep with the man who was supposed to help us heal? The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. I could see her struggling for words, tears welling up in her eyes. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't plan for it to happen, it just did. Just did, I echoed, incredulous. You didn't think about the consequences. You didn't think about me, about our marriage. The anger surged within me and I fought to keep my voice steady. You went to him for help and instead you ended up in his bed. How is that not premeditated? I felt alone and he was there for me, she said, her voice rising defensively. You were so consumed with work and I needed someone to talk to. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Her words struck a chord and I felt a wave of conflicting emotions crash over me. Part of me understood the loneliness she felt. I had been distant, preoccupied with my job, but that didn't excuse her actions. So you thought sleeping with him was the answer. You thought that would fix things. I shot back, my voice laced with disbelief. I thought it would help me feel something again, she admitted, her voice breaking. I didn't realize how much I was hurting until it was too late. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of sincerity, any glimmer of remorse. But all I could see was a woman caught in a web of her own making, and it filled me with rage. You think this is just going to blow over? You think I can just forgive and forget? I said, my voice low and dangerous. You have no idea how deeply you've wounded me. I know, she replied, her voice trembling. I know I've hurt you and I'm so sorry. Please, I want to make it right. I'll do anything. Anything. I echoed, my skepticism palpable. What could you possibly do to make this right? Trust is shattered and you expect me to just accept your apologies. I can't even look at you without feeling sick. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me, and I struggled to contain the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. I had always believed that love could conquer all, but now I felt like a fool for thinking that way. The love I had for Sarah felt tainted, overshadowed by the betrayal that hung between us like a dark cloud. I don't even know if I can trust you anymore, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. How can I know you won't do this again? Please just give me a chance to prove myself, she pleaded, her eyes pleading for understanding. I love you. I made a mistake, but I want to fix this. I want us back. The words echoed in my mind, but they felt hollow. Love. How could she still claim to love me after what she had done? I felt a surge of bitterness rise within me, a desire to unleash my anger to make her understand the depth of her betrayal. But I forced myself to remain calm. I had to be rational. I had to find a way to turn this pain into something actionable. Fixing this isn't just about words, Sarah. It's about accountability, I said, my voice steady. And that means confronting Dr. Stevens. I won't let him continue to counsel couples while he's sleeping with his clients. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about every couple he's deceived. Her eyes widened in shock at my words. You can't be serious, she said, her voice rising in panic. You can't expose him. It will ruin his career. Good, I replied coldly. He deserves every bit of it. He took advantage of your vulnerability and I won't let him get away with it. You may have made a choice, but so did he. He betrayed my trust too. The realization of what I was proposing hung in the air, thick and heavy. Sarah's face twisted in fear and disbelief. You don't know what you're doing, she warned, her voice trembling. This could destroy everything. It could destroy us. Everything is already destroyed, Sarah, I shot back. You need to understand the consequences of your actions. This isn't just about you anymore, it's about justice. And I will see that he pays for what he's done. As I spoke, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was no longer a passive bystander in my own life. I was taking control. The path ahead would be difficult, but I was resolved. I would expose the truth, and I would ensure that Dr. Stevens never gave advice to anyone again. The confrontation ended there, but it marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with pain, anger, and a burning desire for revenge. I wouldn't rest until I had made them both pay for the betrayal that had shattered my world. After that confrontation, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. I had made my decision, and now I had to follow through. The thought of exposing Dr. Stevens fueled a fire within me, but at the same time I was acutely aware of the potential fallout. This was not just about my pain, it was about the lives that could be affected by my actions. But I had to remind myself, I was doing this for justice. I refused to let his betrayal go unpunished. The first step was to gather evidence. I needed to document everything that had happened, to build a case against him. I spent hours combing through my memory, piecing together moments from our counseling sessions that now felt tainted. I recalled the subtle ways he had manipulated our conversations, steering us toward emotional discussions that left us vulnerable. I had trusted him, and now I felt sickened by the realization that he had abused that trust. I started by reaching out to other clients of Dr. Stevens. It took time, but eventually I found a few who were willing to share their experiences. Each story was similar, an emotional affair masked as professional counseling, a betrayal of trust that left them reeling. I documented their accounts meticulously, compiling a dossier that would serve as evidence of his unethical behavior. It felt empowering to take control, to transform my pain into action. Meanwhile, Sarah was a constant presence in my life, but a different one than before. I could see the guilt etched on her face, the way her eyes would dart away when I mentioned Dr. Stevens. She was desperate for forgiveness, but I wasn't ready to grant it. I felt numb around her, caught between the love I once had and the betrayal that had shattered it. It was a strange limbo, one that left me feeling isolated and angry. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table poring over my notes, Sarah approached me cautiously. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I looked up, my heart racing. "What is there to talk about? You've made your choices clear," I replied, bitterness lacing my words. "I know I hurt you," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "But I want to be better. I want to fix this. I want to help you with whatever you're planning." I shook my head, anger bubbling to the surface. "Help me? You think you can just waltz back into my life and pretend this didn't happen? You think your remorse is enough to erase the damage?" "I don't expect forgiveness," she replied, her voice trembling. "But I want to be part of the solution. I know what I did was wrong, but I can't just stand by and watch you destroy yourself trying to expose him." "Destroy myself?" I echoed, incredulous. "This isn't self-destruction. This is justice. You need to understand the difference." She took a step closer, her voice earnest. "I do understand, but what if exposing him only brings more pain? What if it ruins your life too?" I paused, her words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. "I'm already living in pain, Sarah. How could it possibly get worse?" The silence that followed was heavy. I could see the turmoil in her eyes, the conflict between her guilt and her desire to protect me. But I had made my choice, and I couldn't allow her to sway me. I had to see this through. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously prepared my case against Dr. Stevens. I gathered testimonies, printed emails, and compiled records of his inappropriate behavior. I even reached out to a few former clients who had left his practice under questionable circumstances. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory, a step closer to exposing the truth. But as the days passed, I found myself also grappling with the emotional toll this was taking on me. The anger that had once fueled my determination began to ebb, replaced by a hollow ache. I was consumed by thoughts of betrayal and loss, and I realized I was also losing a part of myself in the process. I hadn't just lost Sarah, I was losing my sense of who I was. One night, as I sat alone in the dark, I found myself questioning everything. Was this revenge worth it? Would it truly bring me the closure I sought, or would it only deepen the wounds? I felt a surge of doubt, a flicker of uncertainty that threatened to consume me. In that moment, I realized that while I was focused on Dr. Stevens, I hadn't taken the time to address my own healing. I needed to talk to someone, to find a way to process the whirlwind of emotions I was experiencing. I decided to reach out to a therapist of my own, someone who could help me navigate the chaos in my mind. It felt like a step in the right direction, a way to reclaim my sense of self amidst the turmoil. As I began attending therapy sessions, I found a space to explore my feelings of anger, betrayal, and sorrow. My therapist helped me unpack the layers of my emotions, guiding me to understand that my pain was valid, but so was my desire for healing. I began to realize that while I wanted justice, I also needed to prioritize my own well-being. In therapy, I learned to set boundaries, to focus on my own needs instead of being consumed by thoughts of revenge. My therapist encouraged me to express my feelings, to confront Sarah not just with anger, but with a desire for understanding. I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could control how I moved forward. It was during one of these sessions that I finally found clarity. I could pursue exposing Dr. Stevens, but I didn't have to let it define me. I could seek justice without losing myself in the process. I could be a survivor, not just a victim. With renewed resolve, I returned home, ready to confront Sarah once more. This time, it wouldn't be about anger or blame. It would be about finding a way to navigate this shattered landscape together, even if it meant acknowledging that our relationship might never be the same. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady as I approached her, "we need to talk about us, and about what's next." As I sat down across from Sarah, I felt a mixture of apprehension and determination. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, the weight of our shared history pressing down on both of us. I had spent weeks grappling with my feelings, and now I was ready to confront not just her actions, but our future, whatever that might hold. "Sarah," I began, my voice steady but gentle, "we can't keep pretending everything is fine. I need to know where we stand, and I need you to be honest with me." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the pain that mirrored my own. "I know I've hurt you deeply, and I can't take back what I did, but I want to work on this on us. I want to be better." I could see the sincerity in her eyes, but I also felt the remnants of my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "I appreciate that, but it's going to take time. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. I can't just forget that you slept with Dr. Stevens." "I don't expect you to forget," she replied, her voice breaking. "I just want a chance to prove that I can be the partner you deserve. I want to help you with your plan to expose him if that's what you want." Her offer surprised me. I had been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't considered how she might want to take responsibility for her actions. "You really want to help?" I asked, skepticism creeping into my voice. "Yes," she insisted, her gaze unwavering. "I want to help you gather evidence. I owe you that much. I want to show you that I can be trustworthy again." I took a deep breath, weighing her words. Part of me still wanted to push her away to protect my heart from further harm, but another part of me recognized that if we were going to heal, we needed to do this together. "All right," I said finally, "but this won't be easy. I need to know that you're fully committed to this process." "I am," she said, a hint of desperation in her voice. "I'll do whatever it takes." As we began to work together, I found it both challenging and cathartic. Sarah helped me reach out to former clients of Dr. Stevens, using her knowledge of his practice to gather information. We spent late nights poring over documents, piecing together a timeline that would expose his unethical behavior. It felt surreal to be collaborating with the very person who had caused me so much pain, but it was also a step toward healing. In those moments, I could see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, her determination, her intelligence, and her willingness to face the consequences of her actions. It was a reminder that while she had hurt me, she was also capable of growth and change. I began to allow myself to feel a flicker of hope, even as the shadows of doubt loomed over me. However, the emotional toll of our work weighed heavily on both of us. Each piece of evidence we uncovered felt like a double-edged sword, a reminder of the betrayal that had shattered our lives. I found myself oscillating between anger and compassion, and it became clear that healing would not be a linear process. One evening, as we sat in the living room surrounded by our notes and documents, I looked over at Sarah, who was deep in thought. "Do you ever think about what life would be like if this hadn't happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up, her eyes filled with sadness. "All the time I think about how much I took for granted. I thought we were invincible, and now I see how fragile everything really is." "Do you regret it?" I asked, holding my breath as I awaited her response. "I regret hurting you more than anything," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I wish I could take it back, but I can't." All I can do is try to make it right." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I appreciate that, but I need time. I can't just flip a switch and feel the same way I did before." "I understand," she replied softly. "I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." In that moment, I realized that healing would require patience from both of us. We were embarking on a journey that would test our resilience and commitment to one another. As difficult as it was, I could see the path ahead was one of shared responsibility and growth. Meanwhile, my therapy sessions continued to provide clarity and support. My therapist encouraged me to explore my feelings of anger and betrayal, but also to recognize the importance of forgiveness, not just for Sarah, but for myself. I learned that forgiveness didn't mean condoning her actions. It meant releasing the hold that resentment had on me. It was about reclaiming my power. As I began to let go of the anger, I found myself more open to the possibility of rebuilding our relationship. I still had doubts, but I also recognized that we were both flawed individuals trying to navigate the aftermath of a painful experience. One day, after a particularly productive session, I came home feeling lighter. I walked into the living room to find Sarah waiting for me, a hesitant smile on her face. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "It went well," I replied, a sense of calm washing over me. "I think I'm starting to understand that healing is a process, not a destination." Her smile widened, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I want to be part of that process wherever it leads us. As we sat together, I realized that while the road ahead would be challenging, we were no longer facing it alone. We were partners in this journey, navigating the complexities of our emotions and striving for healing. In the days that followed, we continued our work against Dr. Stevens, but it no longer felt like a revenge mission. It felt like a step toward reclaiming our lives, a way to take back control of our narrative. And as I looked at Sarah, I saw not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman who was willing to fight for our future. It was a delicate balance, but I was beginning to believe that healing was possible, even amidst the scars left by betrayal. As the weeks turned into months, the work against Dr. Stevens progressed steadily. With Sarah by my side, we gathered testimonies and evidence, building a comprehensive case that would expose his unethical practices. Each piece of information felt like a small victory, a step closer to confronting the man who had betrayed our trust. But more importantly, it felt like a step toward reclaiming our lives. In the midst of this endeavor, I found solace in my therapy sessions. I learned to articulate my feelings and began to understand the complexities of forgiveness. My therapist helped me see that while I had every right to be angry, holding on to that anger would only serve to cage me in a prison of my own making. I needed to find a way to let go, not just for Sarah's sake, but for my own healing. One evening, as Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table reviewing our findings, I looked at her and saw the determination etched on her face. "You've changed," I said, my voice softening. "You're not the same woman who made that choice. You're fighting for us now." She met my gaze, and I could see the weight of her remorse mixed with a newfound strength. "I want to be better. I want to show you that I can be trusted again. I know I've broken your heart, but I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to heal it." I nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and vulnerability. "I appreciate that, but it's going to take time. I still have doubts, and that's okay. I just need you to understand that." "I understand," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm here for the long haul, no matter how long it takes." As we continued our work, I felt a shift within myself. I was no longer simply a victim seeking revenge. I was reclaiming my narrative. I was taking control of my life, and in doing so, I was allowing space for healing and growth. I began to recognize that while Sarah's actions had caused me immense pain, they didn't have to define who I was. The day finally came when we had enough evidence to confront Dr. Stevens. I felt a mix of anxiety and resolve as I prepared for the meeting. This was it, the moment I had been anticipating, the culmination of my efforts to expose the man who had betrayed us both. When we arrived at his office, my heart raced. I could feel the tension in the air as we stepped into the waiting room, the familiar surroundings now tainted by the knowledge of his betrayal. Sarah and I exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between us. We were in this together. Dr. Stevens greeted us with his usual charm, but I could see the flicker of surprise in his eyes when he noticed the seriousness etched on our faces. "What brings you two in today?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. I took a deep breath, summoning the strength I had built over the past months. "We need to talk about your unethical behavior, Dr. Stevens. We know about the affair and we're here to hold you accountable." His expression shifted, a flicker of defensiveness crossing his features. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "I'm here to help you. Help us," I echoed, my voice rising in anger. "You took advantage of Sarah's vulnerability. You were supposed to guide us, not betray our trust." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "You manipulated our sessions to get what you wanted. You've hurt both of us, and it's time for you to face the consequences." The confrontation unfolded, each word exchanged feeling like a cathartic release. I could see the cracks in Dr. Stevens' facade as he attempted to deflect blame, but we stood firm, armed with evidence and the truth of our experiences. It felt empowering to confront him, to take back the narrative that he had tried to control. As we left his office, a sense of relief washed over me. I had faced the man who had betrayed me, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my power. I looked over at Sarah, who was visibly shaken but also resolute. "We did it," I said, my voice filled with a mix of disbelief and triumph. She nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We did it together." In the days that followed, we continued to process the fallout of our confrontation. Dr. Stevens faced the consequences of his actions, and I felt a sense of closure begin to settle within me. While the scars of betrayal would always be a part of my story, I was learning to embrace them as reminders of my resilience. As spring approached, I noticed a shift in our relationship. The weight of betrayal began to lift, and I found myself more open to the possibility of healing. We started to explore new ways to connect, focusing on rebuilding our trust through honest communication and shared experiences. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to Sarah. "I do know what the future holds for us, but I'm willing to try," I said, my heart pounding. "I want to rebuild what we had, but it will take time." "I want that too," she replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. "I know I've hurt you and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, but I also want to grow together." In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. We were both flawed individuals, but we were also capable of change and growth. I realized that healing wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. We had faced the storm together, and while the road ahead would be filled with challenges, we were willing to navigate it side by side. As I reflected on our journey, I understood that betrayal had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. I had emerged from the darkness stronger and more aware of my own worth. I was no longer just a victim, I was a survivor. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace settle within me. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it may hold, with an open heart and a newfound strength. In the end, I learned that while betrayal could shatter trust, it could also pave the way for healing and growth. I was determined to turn this chapter of my life into one of resilience, love, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly forgive. With Sarah by my side, I was ready to write the next chapter of our story.